This is Tyrese Halliburton, and you're listening to Setting the Pace.
Yo, what's up, Pacer Nation? Welcome back to another episode here of your go-to Pacers podcast. And on today's show, we got the great Keith Smith coming back for part 2 of our conversation. But before we get into that, it is time to talk about the NBA schedule. Yes, the NBA released their schedule for the upcoming season, which means we now know some of these key games the Indiana Pacers will be playing and who they'll be playing and when they'll be returning to Gainbridge Fieldhouse and all that kind of fun stuff. But I don't want to dive into the schedule too much just because me and Facci next week will be going through the schedule game by game, predicting wins and losses, and then letting you guys know at the end of our conversation what we think the Pacers record will be at the end of the season. So it's going to be fun, but just to kind of start things off, we do have 9 nationally televised games for the Pacers. And I think a lot of people were disappointed that number was below double digits. Not very often do you see a team make it to the NBA Finals, not get that many national televised games. But at the end of the day, they don't have Halliburton, and that makes a big difference. So if Halliburton were here, it'd be interesting. I bet they have almost double what they have now. So got to figure that out. But this year, a lot of things are different because there's no TNT anymore. You've got Amazon Prime, you've got Peacock, you've got NBC, then you've got ESPN plus the ESPN app. So as well as Bally Sports. So I think maybe it's FanDuel Sports Network. Excuse me. I've already forgot what the name of the Pacers television network was, but that is your local games where you can watch it at. So it's going to be, one of those things where you're going to have to try to watch Pacers on multiple different channels. But with that being said, let's talk about some of these key games the Pacers have. Obviously, you guys saw this a couple of days ago. Me and Facci did not bring it up, but the opener on October 23rd is Thursday against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and it's at home. So that's exciting for the Pacers. However, a lot of teams will be playing Tuesday and Wednesday, which means you're going to have to wait an extra day for the Pacers' first game, which is going to feel like an eternity. And then you've got Miles Turner's return to Gainbridge Fieldhouse on November 3rd when the Bucks will be playing the Pacers. That'll be Game 7 of the season. They will also be in town 2 days before Christmas on December 23rd. So if you guys want to check out any of those games against the Bucks, the Pacers' probably biggest rival in the NBA right now, check that out. Then they play the Knicks on December 18th, and they also play them on March 13th. So if you want to see them play the Knicks in Gainbridge Fieldhouse, you have 2 opportunities there. And then, of course, I don't really know if this is much of a rivalry or a key game, but considering who they faced in the playoffs last year, the Cavaliers will be in town December 1st and January 6th. So back-to-back months, you'll have a chance to see them there. The other one that's really interesting is Rivalry Week. And on January 23rd, the Pacers will be at OKC for Rivalry Week. Don't understand why they didn't have Pacers-Knicks or Pacers-Bucks, but because it's the finals rematch, we've got that. So there's just some interesting matchups there on Rivalry Week. I saw Houston and Detroit was another one that didn't make a lick of sense to me outside of the Thompson twins being on those teams. There's not really a rivalry there outside of the brothers, maybe. So I think the NBA has no pulse on what is actually happening with rivals. Now, if anybody cares about the NBA Cup games, they did release that a day before. And on Halloween, October 31st, the Pacers will be playing the Hawks. On the 21st of November, they'll play the Cavs. The 26th of November, they'll play the Raptors. And the 28th of November, they play the Wizards. This, to me, is the wonkiest schedule I've ever seen for the NBA Cup. You're going to start it at the end of October, play a random game against the Hawks, and then you're not going to play another NBA Cup game for 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden, you have to play 3 basically out of 4 games, NBA Cup games. So I do not understand that. I think it's a little bit stupid, if you ask me personally. Could have spread those games out better, but it doesn't really matter. I think the NBA Cup, after its first go through, now its second go through, I don't think anybody really cares that much about it. Now, let's get to the schedule. The back-to-backs, there are 10 back-to-backs for your Indiana Pacers this year. They also have 2 sets of, they have 6 road trips. They also have 6 homestands. So this road trip, the road trips here are kind of interesting. They kind of start one off early. After their home opener, they're going to Memphis, then Minnesota, then Dallas. And then they have one not too much longer after that against Denver, Golden State, Utah, and Phoenix. So you're talking altitude on a back-to-back too against the Warriors and the Nuggets. That'll be difficult. Then they have a 5-game road trip in the Eastern Conference where it's Detroit, Philadelphia, Boston, and then they go to OKC, and then they finish it out in Atlanta. Then they have a very strange 6-game road trip. That is a 4-game road trip, the All-Star break, and they start the next 2 games after the All-Star break on the road. Thankfully, it's not a lot of travel. They're playing in Milwaukee, then Toronto, then they're playing the Knicks, then they're playing the Nets. So not a lot of travel there. Go to the All-Star break, then you have a back-to-back on the road in Washington. So if you are a Washington native, Washington, D.C. native, and you wanna go watch the Pacers, you have a back-to-back chance to watch them there playing after the All-Star break. Then in later, I think it's in March, maybe it's late February, but I think it's March, they play the Clippers, the Lakers, the Trailblazers, and the Kings, so they finish out their second West Coast road trip. Then they have another Eastern home road trip in April with Chicago, Charlotte, and the Cavs. So, interesting thing there, I've never really seen where you're on a road trip, go to the All-Star break, and then finish out a road trip. Thought that was really interesting, but that is the road trips. Now let's look at the homestands here. The Pacers have 6 homestands, and none of them are greater than 4 games. So the first one is after their first road trip, they'll be playing Atlanta, Golden State, Milwaukee, and Brooklyn. Then they have one against Washington, Chicago, Cleveland, and Denver. They also have another one against Miami, Boston, Toronto, and the Pelicans. They have another one. It's Chicago, Atlanta, Houston, and Utah. Dallas, Philadelphia, Charlotte, Memphis. And then the last one, the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Heat. So just some random games here in a row. Some of these look very favorable in terms of the matchup. Some of them look like, ooh, that could be tough. So I think that was just interesting to me. But the 10 back-to-backs isn't too bad. I don't know what the league average is, but it doesn't seem like 10 is that outlandish, and they don't seem to be like a lot in a row either. It looks like they're kind of spread out. So that is kind of the schedule breakdown in terms of what are the big games, what is how the schedule broke down, and whatever. So homestands, road trips, they are 6 and 6. They do kind of even out. And I believe there's only 80 games scheduled because of the NBA Cup. And so they will not know what other 2 games to schedule after that. So the Pacers could be playing like we saw last year. They played the Pelicans 3 times. It's not usually how it works, but that happened because of the way the NBA Cup played out. So be on the lookout for those 2 additional games, and that could add maybe back-to-backs into the mix, maybe more back-to-backs. Maybe there's a longer road trip. Maybe there's a longer homestand. We don't really know yet. So that is that. So let's go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the Eastern Conference, players that could be on the trade market, and we talk about a potential center the Pacers could look at and whether or not this team would be willing to move him. So I think you guys are going to enjoy that conversation as well with Keith Smith. Hope you all have a great day. And then, we also have a bonus segment at the end of our conversation with Keith Smith. We have Chandler, our fan of the week. So a big loaded episode for you guys today on this Friday. Hope you guys enjoy your weekends, enjoy the weather, and have a great time. But let's get to our conversation with Keith Smith.
And transitioning over to a team that might need to experiment just a little bit as well, looking like a little bit different than they were last year. The Boston Celtics, a team we
A
know
little
quite
bit.
well. We have seen this team slash payroll left and right. Keith, I know I would just throw out a generalized number. I'm sure you have that number a little bit more accurate, but just tell us what's going on with the Boston Celtics and what can you really expect knowing there's not going to be Tatum. Drew Holiday's been traded. They've made a couple other moves to, kind of inch their way as below. I think they're just above the first apron right now. Is that correct?
Yep. Yep. So they were a second apron team. Everybody's been talking about second apron, right? That's been like one of the big storylines since the end of last season, really even in last season. The way I explain the second apron now to people is the second apron's like going to Las Vegas. It's okay if you visit short term, but if you stay too long, it's going to get really painful and it's going to get really expensive. So you just don't want to stay very long, right? It's you want to kind of come and you want to go. So it's for the Celtics. They loaded up a couple years ago. They loaded up because we're close. We got Porzingis, we got Holiday. Let's really make our run. Let's go, and it paid off. They won a title. No one can say that was the wrong move. But they were also very open at the time about saying, we knew this was probably going to be where we landed eventually, right? We went and got all these guys, we extended a couple of them, and they just weren't going to live there. And then it's not the right term to use because I don't know that they don't make some of these moves anyway, but they had cover when Jason Tatum got injured to basically say, all right, we're not a title contender without him. There was no move they could have made that could have made them a title contender without Jason Tatum. So let's just start the process now so that when he's back, we're in a better place and we can build back up again and go do what we need to do. So out goes Porzingis in a deal, which ultimately now I think basically they've all but shaved his entire contract off. Well, actually, they have now fully gotten his because they've also moved on from George Niang. Yeah, that one cost him a couple seconds. It cost him a first to move Porzingis, but not the end of the world there. And then Drew Holiday for Anthony Simons. That was a smaller step down in salary, but still a step down in salary. So you're really in a point where they've taken their overall bill between salary plus taxes and penalties was going to be 500 million going into this season. It's now like 200 and 50 million or so in that range. And basically cut. Actually, it's less than that because there's a little over 500. They've cut over 300 million in payroll.
Wow.
So they're at a spot where $500 million is no longer the thing. They have a new ownership group coming in. This wasn't why they did that. I've heard some people say, new owners are making them cut. They don't want to be expensive. This was going to happen. New owners, old owners, no matter who it was. It was going to come eventually, and they just said, let's do it now. Let's get it done. I think they are similar-ish to the Pacers now, where it's not going to look like it did the last couple years. It's going to look a little bit different. They're not going to win quite as much, probably, but it kind of is what it is. But there's also still too much talent here, too many guys who play hard, too good of infrastructure. They're not just going to go full into the tank. Now, that said, if they hit like middle of January and it's like, man, this is going nowhere, you might all of a sudden see, oh yeah, this guy's got back spasms, or this guy's got, he rolled an ankle and he's out for 4 weeks instead of a week, those kind of things, because then it's just a smart decision, right? If we're going nowhere, might as well maximize ping pong balls and what looks like it's going to be an absolute loaded draft class again. So yeah, but I think in general, I still think they're playing tournament caliber because there's just too many good guys still around.
Yeah, I would say a lot of people have been pigeonholing the Pacers and the Celtics, kind of been lumping them together in that one group. And I feel like both still have enough talent where they can maybe surprise and be outside of the play or, get into the top six potentially just because of how weak the Eastern Conference is and a lot of unknown teams. But one team that made a step forward last year, and I think they kind of caught people by surprise, was the Detroit Pistons a little bit. Pushed the Knicks in a series where it could have gone either way, really, here or there, a couple games. They've made some changes to their roster. What do you like about their offseason moves, and what don't you like about their offseason moves and how they've kind of built this team?
Yeah, and they obviously got caught a little off guard with the Malik Beasley stuff right before the start of free agency, and very clearly had to pivot from that. But I think they've done fairly well in that pivot. It seemed once we got into free agency and really started talking to more people, it was Dennis Schroeder really wants to start, and he's probably not going to start in Detroit. And it was, I think for Schroeder this is probably my last real chance at being a starter in the league before I'll probably settle into a backup role to end my career. So once that became clear that was important to him, well, now he's out of the mix. But I think they've done really well to get, in a lot of ways, the guys that they lost in Detroit, the guys who left. So the three main guys are guys who were, I shouldn't necessarily say left because Beasley hasn't left, but he's not going to be back. So Beasley, Hardaway, then Schroeder. And before anybody scoffs and says Hardaway started 70-something games for a playoff team a year ago. So yeah, I'm going to put him in that mix. But they replaced those guys with, in effect, Karis LeVert comes in as kind of the ball handler, playmaker in place of Schroeder on that second unit. You got Duncan Robinson to be your designated shooter. He comes in, that replaces Beasley. And then Jaden Ivey is almost like an addition because he missed the whole second half of the year, and that kind of replaces a little bit what you got out Hardaway. Plus, I think he can be even better than that. So I think in an offseason where things were a little rough, the way they started, I think they rebounded fairly well. And the nice thing is they didn't do anything that kind of super locks them into big money long term. Like I think they did a nice job, Trajan Langdon in that front office, of not overreacting and being like, man, we lost. Let's go trade for a $40 million player and try to go. I think they were very conscious of we have real decisions right now with Duren and Ivy because they're in the same boat as Matherin is as far as being extension eligible. So we got to figure that out. It sounds crazy because it feels like they got in the league a week ago, but Osar Thompson's already ready for an extension a year from now. So like, and you've got Cade Cunningham. He, of course, bumped up too because by making All NBA, something I know y'all are familiar with. What happens when that happens? That was an extra $8 million, and those ones are always funny because I always laugh, and I've talked to people about this where it's like, yeah, you can't go out there and be like, don't vote for our guy, but when they get voted in, you're a little like, all right, I'm happy for the guy, and publicly you're very happy for them, but you are a little like, cap sheet could have used it if you didn't make it, but it is what it is, Or let's make it the year after we sign you, right? And the contract's locked in. But yeah, I think they were really smart. Let's just keep building, and I think they did a pretty good job this summer, all things considered.
One team that's been knocking on the door for the last couple of years is now slamming on that door. That's the Orlando Magic. They made the big swing for Desmond Bain, gave up a lot of picks. They say we're ready to win right now. I think at first it was a little, wow, this is a big move. Now you look at the landscape of the East with Boston down, the Pacers being down, you don't know what's going on with Philly. It really feels like Orlando has a big opportunity here to make some noise. How high do you think Orlando could potentially climb the standings, knowing that they were already a really good defensive unit that needed three-point shooting, and now you obviously bring in Desmond Bain, who can bring just that?
Yeah, and Tyus Jones, I think, was a really good pickup for
Already.
them as well. Just to add a little bit more stability to the guard group. This was a team that in the latter half of the regular season and then in the playoffs was starting Corey Joseph. And no disrespect meant, but Corey
Crazy
Joseph
25.
was, yeah,
He was
right.
making years ago,
Like
man.
that's what I mean. Now, some of that was Jalen Suggs was hurt, but he was starting even when Suggs was around. It just became, all right, this is the guy we trust. Now you're better off with Jones and Bain. I'll coach all that with whatever magic portal you walk through in Orlando and lose the ability to shoot. As long as that doesn't happen, I think the Bain move is a home run for the Magic. I get it that they gave up draft picks, but this is a team that they've got a lot of guys and a lot of guys under contract long term. They're not sitting on a whole bunch of roster spots. And what do we always kind of beg a team to do when they're close is like, hey, consolidate. Well, they consolidated through draft picks. They're just not going to draft a bunch more guys because they don't really have room on the roster. So I have no problem. And if things go well, all those picks you gave up should be fairly late picks. There is one involving the Suns in there. It's very complicated. I won't bore people to tears, but it's probably going to be the Suns pick, and it should be pretty good. But the rest are going to be Magic picks that I think that Magic feel like, hey, if we do what we should do, you got Bankero and Wagner, Franz Wagner. You have Mo Wagner back as well, but those two guys are really good. And I think the big thing that the Magic were conscious about was they didn't want to bring anybody in that was going to be all right, here's the dominant on-ball point guard, right? There were people like trade for Trae Young before you get traded to the Spurs. Go get De'Aaron Fox and all those things. And those guys, while good players, I think the Magic were we do not want too many reps where Paolo and Franz are relegated to standing off ball waiting. Like we want them in position where they can set guys up. And Bain should be awesome because the other thing is they didn't really downgrade defensively because Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has slipped quite a bit on that end of the floor, and Bane's a pretty rugged defender. So I think they're gonna be really good. It would not surprise me if kind of at some point in the season we look up and like Magic are hanging in with the Cavs and the Knicks at the top of the conference because I think the Cavs and the Knicks are gonna take the approach of we don't need to push for every single win every night. Like we just need to get into the playoffs healthy. And I think for Orlando, it's going to be, hey, if we can swipe home court advantage from one of those two teams, that puts us in a better position to advance ultimately.
You're talking about the Magic here, and I would say that Pacer fans have been looking across the league for center help that could potentially make some sense. And Wendell Carter Jr. is a name that's come up a handful of times, especially with his contract extension that kicks in next season. So, in terms of Wendell Carter Jr., what do you think is the likelihood Orlando would be willing to move off of him because of the salary implications they have? And what kind of deal would you expect them to want in return for him?
Yeah, I think the challenge is they want to be really good and they want to contend this year. So I don't see a trade happening for him this year. I think that's more likely we're talking a year from now and he's on a different team. I think this year, because his contract is actually still fairly low and fits nicely within their salary structure, I think it's more likely that maybe Jonathan Isaac gets moved as let's just get in front of it a little bit. Because with Jonathan Isaac, we're also in a position where it is he ever going to be able to play more than 20 minutes a night on the high end? And that's where it becomes a little bit of a challenge. And then for a lot of other teams in the league, like for example, for the Pacers, not that Isaac wouldn't be good for them, but he's not a starting center, right? He can't be a 30-minute a night starting center where Carter can be that. But they get a lot of calls on Wendell Carter this offseason. Again, like because what you said, his contract is pretty solid, especially right now. And then this extension's a little bit more, but it's still fine. So they were getting calls on him and they basically shut it down. So I think they'd need like a real return package. And ideally, maybe even somebody that they could kind of slot in where it was like, it's kind of funny because it'd be almost undoing the trade. But if they were like, we're going to send him back to the Bulls and we're going to take Vucevic back, but that's because, all right, well, Vucevic's contract runs out and we get a starting center for the rest of the year. They're not going to do that. That ship has long since sailed, but that's the kind of thing you're looking at where it's like, yeah, if we're going to send Carter out, we probably need somebody because they'll start Goga Batadze if they need to, but they are not super deep at that center spot because it's become very clear now. Paolo's no longer like maybe he might play some minutes as a small ball five as the talent level has improved around him, but those are going to be very few and far between. It's so they need somebody else in that group.
It's funny because the minimum amount of games that you need to play to qualify for any type of NBA award, 65 games. I looked up the Jonathan Isaac contract. In his contract, he has to play 52 games in order for, some of those the years to be guaranteed. It's setting the bar very low. It's like basically playing about 60% of the season. If he can do something like that, he'll have his contract guaranteed. But for the most part, it's one of those where a couple of those years might not be guaranteed at all. So I could see that contract being an appealing trade chip at some point. But moving over to another team in the Eastern Conference, I brought him up earlier, but like the Philadelphia 76ers, we've heard some unfortunate reports about Joel Embiid. Feels to be that's almost a yearly tradition, but it starts to feel a little bit different this year. Obviously, Paul George immediately looks like he aged a lot over the past year. And then you got Tyrese Maxey, who looks like he's in his prime. For Philly, what do you think? Because this is their window right now. Like Paul George isn't getting any younger either. Is Embiid. Like you have essentially three max players. I mean, what do you think that Philly can be this year and potentially maybe even moving forward?
Yeah, so I started doing my work. I like to do things in tiers, especially at this point in the off season where it's like, who are the contenders? Who are the teams in the mix for home court advantage? Who are the play-in tournament teams? So I did the contenders in the East, Cleveland and New York. That's, I think, exceedingly fair. Then I had my playoff team group, and then I got in a play-in tournament team, and I'm looking at Philly, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to create a tier, and it's just going to be Sixers. And I dropped them right in between teams that could be fighting for home court advantage and teams that could be down in the play-in mix because I don't know what to do with them. If you told me Embiid and George were going to play 60 games apiece, that's a playoff team. They'll be fine, right? They've got enough other really good players. They can get by with 20 to 25 missed games out of those guys. But at this point, like that feels like the extreme high watermark if they play, would be, 60 games. I mean, we're already hearing Paul George isn't going to be ready, until maybe around the start of the season. Like that's just not how you wanted the reports out of there to be like, these guys are ready to start training camp tomorrow, right? And we're having to hold them back instead of, we might not be ready. They've got some issues and those kind of things. So I'm really worried about that team. And I'm afraid, when we get into next June and July, we're talking about, all right, how do they get out from under, at least one of these two contracts and move in a completely different direction. And people keep bringing up, well, maybe they can medically retire Embiid. I think Embiid's going to keep trying to play. So I don't think it's going to come. I think, he's going to play games this year. And every time you play, that just sets that clock back one more year from the date of the last game. And that's where it's going to be tough. So I don't think it's very likely that both of those guys see out the rest of their contract in Philadelphia. And I've had people be like, well, how could they ever trade Paul George? Well, guys get traded all the time. And eventually at some point you just turn into a contract and, you'll have some team that's like, man, we stink and we'll take you. It might cost them 2 or 3 draft picks and maybe one of their nice young players, but it's tough because I love Maxey, I like McCain, I love the Edgecombe pick, I like a lot of their role players, but yeah, without being a complete jerk about it, none of it matters unless Embiid and George are healthy. Like they're just not going to be very good.
Yeah, it definitely does feel like Paul George could be a member of the Brooklyn Nets or the Utah Jazz in the next, 12 to 14
Yes,
months.
right? Or
You
feels
think
like
Jazz? I feel like Brooklyn kinda makes a little bit more sense potentially, but you never
does.
really know. I You talked about the Porzingis trade earlier, and I think there's been a lot of people that are fascinated with how the Hawks have built their roster, and there's part of me that thinks, "Man, this could be like a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference," but then the other part's like, "Can I believe in this team?" Like, there's just so many question marks with them, so
Sure.
maybe just your thoughts on the offseason they've had, how they've assembled this group.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty well summed it up. Like, because I'm
Sorry.
there. There's days when I'm like, man, maybe the Hawks are the third best team in the East, right? Like, for me, I'm really who's going to emerge behind Cleveland and New York, right? And did they take their foot off their gas enough that somebody passes them? I have a little bit more faith in Orlando. Maybe that's swayed because this is where I live now. But I'm very high on Atlanta. I think Porzingis is going to give them a dimension that they haven't had before. I've already been doing work on how did Trae Young work with John Collins when John Collins became a reliable three-point shooter while still being one of the better lob threats around the rim, because that's what Porzingis is going to give them there. I think people are. Oh, they got Porzingis. They got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and I've even heard, I really like Aizen Newell in the draft, and Luke Kennard is another shooter for them. But I think people are kind of forgetting Jalen Johnson was awesome last year before he got hurt. And you've got him coming back is again almost like an addition to this team. I think Risa Shea, his improvement from game 1 to game 82 was massive. Like, I mean, think about what he looked like in the first couple summer league games where it's like, "Oh, no." Like, someone had to go number 1, and it looked bad, and now, by the end of the year, it's like, "Ari is actually pretty good." And if you've seen any of these, Eurobasket warm-ups, he's, like, putting dudes in the goal, he looks bigger, he looks stronger, and then you got Dyson Daniels too, who really stepped up and improved, and defense went to a different level defensive, but offensively found some stuff that works as well. So I'm pretty high on that Atlanta team. I think top 4, 5, 6 in that range is kind of like the bottom end for them. And it wouldn't shock me again if they're the ones who sneak in and it's like, wow, the Hawks are the 2 seed. Like, where did this kind of come from? Because I think there's enough talent there for that. Plus, they've got, like, another move or 2 in them if they need to make it, because they have the tradable assets, and boy, that, Pelicans-Bucks unprotected pick that's the better of the 2 in 2026, that looks pretty juicy.
That does, and it kinda I guess working our way back to I'm zigzagging around a little bit, but, like, at the top, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Does it feel like if it ain't this year, it might never happen?
Yep.
Because you look at that roster, and there's guys on that team between a Donovan Mitchell and a Jared Allen and an Evan Mobley and a Darius Garland, and, like, it's like there's a lot of talent there, and the East is open for the taking, but it should have been Cleveland's year last year, and they blew it against the Pacers. Right now, like, if does it feel like that window's starting to come down a bit where now it's just a little bit of a breeze on the bottom instead of maybe like a cool wind?
Yeah, I always say we like to talk about NBA windows like they're, the balcony on a cruise ship, and they're more like, a little tiny crack, like in a hotel room where you're not really supposed to open it, right? Like the windows don't stay open very long in the NBA, and I love the way you framed it because I do. I think if they don't make a real finals run, and when I say make a finals run, that can be the East Finals, but get bounced in like game 7 or something like that. To me, you were right there. You were knocking on the door. And if it's another like second round out or a non-competitive East Finals, they're not going to run it back with those 4 guys. You just can't. At some point, if you just keep doing it, you're just going to keep running your head into the wall and you're never going to get there. And it's funny because Cavs fans, they always reply, "You didn't say that about the Celtics, and they ran it back." but they didn't. It was when they finally moved some of those guys that they finally broke through. And I get it, right? We all fall in love with our guys, right? Like it's man, I want to see. I bet there are Cavs fans are like, I want to see Garland and Allen get there, right? Because those are our guys. We drafted Garland. We got Allen early on in his career, and Mobley's our guy. And we went out and got Mitchell and all the other guys. And it's like, I get it, right? You want to win with your guys. But the thing you really want to do is just win, period. Right? You're still going to buy the t-shirt. You're still going to buy the hat. Like it doesn't matter kind of who is wearing it. Like in the end, we'll root for laundry as fans anyway. So it's one of those things where it's like where you want it to go one way, but you just can't keep beating your head against the wall with the same exact group. They've got to, they're going to have to do something if they don't break through this year. But like you said, this is the best chance they're going to have. They're good. They're deep. They can play a lot of different ways. I think they have a real chance. That said, it would not shock me if they are like 7, 8 wins worse than the regular season because I think they are going to do I think now they've realized winning 65 games doesn't mean much if we can't win in the postseason. And I think those kind of, I like to call them random Tuesday nights in Charlotte in January. Like, man, if we lose to the Hornets, it is what it is. We're not going to worry about it. It's not going to stress us out because the bigger goal is what really matters here.
Talking about losing to the Hornets, that sounds like a Pacers thing to do on a Tuesday night because they have had a lot of trouble with the Charlotte Hornets over the last couple of years. But speaking of contenders in the Eastern Conference.
Oh, man, I thought we were going to get deep into some Hornets talk now.
I was thinking about it, but I feel like I would be being a little bit disrespectful to the New York Knicks if we didn't talk about them just briefly because, let's be honest, they kind of run back the same group and they bring in Yabusele kind of as like their only really offseason addition. Maybe I'm missing somebody here or there, but Jordan Clarkson. The big one to me, though, obviously, letting Tom Thibodeau go and bringing in Mike Brown. How much different do you think Mike Brown's going to make with this team versus a Tom Thibodeau? And do we really think that they're going to maybe go higher now? Or is the only reason they maybe take a step higher is because the East got worse?
Yeah, so to the last part, sure, right? I don't know anybody who doesn't have him in the top 2 or 3 team. You have to really love somebody else to have it not be Cleveland and New York at the top of your kind of preseason projections, standings, tiers, whatever you want to call it. So I think that part is true. I think Mike Brown will come in. Mike Brown he is a very good defensive coach and has been for a long time. I mean, there's times when he had the Sacramento Kings with not a lot of renowned defensive personnel playing at as a league average defense, which is pretty good, right? If that's where you're going, that's going to feel pretty good. And now you've got a team that has a lot of defensive talent. But he's also a more flexible offensive coach, a little bit more creative. And I think getting Chris Gent to come in and run their offensive coach he's very comfortable with, I think that's going to help them a lot too, because that's ultimately what I thought their undoing was they just weren't creative enough offensively. It turned into, we're going to run the Brunson Towns pick and roll, and that's going to be it. And I think if Mike Brown, one thing I think he's going to push them to do is play a little faster. I mean, this team played at a glacial pace at times, especially in the postseason. And they've got the personnel to get out and run more and do more things because Brunson's a good passer. He's really good at attacking. You always have enough shooting. Hart's a really good transition player. Bridges is pretty good. Anunoby's pretty good. And then you have Towns, who maybe is the best trailing big man in the league as far as somebody who can come down the floor against a scramble defense and hit a kick out shot. So I think they can be really good. I think Yabusele was a really nice addition. Clarkson, we'll see. I'm not sure how much there is left there. I mean, certainly not going to hurt, but they've still got other good players. You've got Mitchell Robinson, you got Deuce McBride. So I think they're going to have a really good year in it. But maybe a year less than the Cavs, but not too far off. I think we're in the same kind of boat of if this doesn't get done, where are we going, right? Because Towns is going to need a new contract soon. You've got Anunoby, Bridges, and Brunson now all under contract long term, but at some point you got to look at them and be like, all right, it didn't happen again. Where are we going to go with this group? I think I don't know, unless this year goes really sideways. I don't know if this is it, but again, we're going to start asking those questions real quick because we know, if nothing else, New York fans, they're super patient and willing to wait a really long time and everything, right? It better come sooner rather than later.
Hey, who knows when it'll come, but it has not come. Long, long time for
Has
the
not.
now. But for a team that it feels like that window is now shut. I'm talking there is no draft. There is nothing. It's the Miami Heat. They had their run. They went to 2 NBA finals in a short amount of span. They came up short. But they refuse to ever really just kinda start over. They're big game hunting, but they never end up with the prize in the end. They claim they're rumored to be traded for just about everybody, but they never pull it off. Now you're looking at, like, in the end, who'd they get? They got Andrew Wiggins, and it's just like, what are the Miami Heat doing, and when do you think do you think they either make a big move, or do you think they finally take that step back and say, "Maybe we need to finally hit a little bit of a reset and prioritize younger talent"?
Yeah, I think the Heat are gonna be typical kind of pain in the butt to play against because Bolster's so good. They do have a bunch of guys who will at least defend, guys like Bam and then Davion Mitchell and a couple Wiggins when he's motivated can be a pretty good defender at times too. So I think you're in a spot where they're they're gonna get after it. They're gonna be tough. If you don't show up to play, you're just gonna walk in and beat them. You're gonna have to actually go out and play real basketball to beat them. But yeah, I do wonder, without the whole cloud of the Butler situation hanging over their heads for the first 4 months of the season, what does that look like? Do they feel a little bit better? Are guys playing a little freer? Like, they're not dealing with all that, foolishness that was going on? Is there another step for Khalil Ware to take? I think there obviously is, so that'll be something to monitor, but again, this is a team that's somewhere between 6 and 10 in the East, and feels like we've kinda been there with Miami for, what, 3, 4 years now?
Great years in the play-in.
Yeah, and now, to be fair, they've made runs from those lower seeds before, so different teams and different circumstances, those ones more that's just kinda where they landed versus that being the upside for them, but we'll see. I mean, they're gonna be tough. I think they'll be a decent team. I think they'll conti they're like Lakers East, right? A star comes on the market, and it's, "Alright, well, the Heat will be involved," and they have the tradable contracts. Now they do have a little more draft capital just because 'cause we're a little later down the line, so maybe they can get into a place where, "Alright, we can start piecing together something to go get somebody," but, yeah, I do it feels like the luster is off a little bit there, where people aren't as much like, "Oh, man, this guy's gonna go there, and then this guy's gonna join him," and all that stuff, and I think the Butler saga took a lot out of that.
Hey, I'll tell you what, I'm ready to give the Heat some more draft picks as they blow it up and give the Pacers Bam Adebayo. That's all
Oh,
I'm
man, you
saying.
and about said 27 other teams.
That's all I've been talking about in the offseason. If the Pacers do want to pursue a center, that is somebody that I would really keep my eyes on. Not saying that he would become available just because I know how Miami operates, but
Sure.
if you threw him the mother load, it could be interesting. But I'm curious, though, in terms of other players, would be my last question for you here, Keith. What players, maybe give me like a top three, do you think are the most likely to be traded by the deadline
Ooh,
this season?
that's a good question.
Let me ask you this. When you say that's a good question, do you actually think it's a good question, or is it just to give you more time to think of an
We've
answer?
had the
Because we've
debate
had
here.
this discussion
No,
on the
that's
podcast.
that's also a good question. No, it's both. I tend to use that when I'm caught a little more off guard. But if I think it's just a really I you guys have known me long enough now. I'll
Yeah.
either give you a real quick stock answer, which that whenever I give you a quick rapid fire answer, it means one of two things. Either I feel really strongly about that answer, I'm like, I have no idea what you're asking me. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
gonna give you a real answer. But yeah, so I'm glancing through names here now and kind of looking through to figure it out. I feel like I mean, I don't want to give you a bunch of like silly ones where it's like I think Sam Hauser, right? Because I do think there's a chance he could be traded.
Yeah.
I'll give you my quick thing with Sam Hauser. Having a really good designated shooter off your bench on a team that's not very good is like having a really good closer on a bad baseball team. It's just a luxury you don't really need. Like it's nice, but what do you need it for? But somebody like him, I think is really there. I think Vucevic, I think, the Bulls may be ready to make a move there. I think, something's gonna happen in Toronto. That team's just weird. Like, that's just a weird roster with a lot of overlapping skill sets. I think if it's gonna be anybody, it'll probably be RJ Barrett, who gets moved. there. If I'm Michael Porter Jr., I'm highly encouraging him to rent in Brooklyn versus buy. I don't know that he's going to be there very long. I think the challenge is there's not a lot of teams, at least to start the year, especially like in the Western Conference, where they're just bad. Because that's normally where your eye goes first, right? It's like, oh, they stink. They're going to move on from vets. And I think when we really open the year, Utah's like the only team in the West that's not going to try to be good to open. I don't think New Orleans gets there. I don't know that Phoenix gets there. I'll give you a couple more like Chris Middleton, CJ McCollum, what place do they have on a bad Wizards team? They'll be fine to help them early in the year and help the kids grow up. I'll give you kind of two, though. They're just kind of percolating in the back of my mind, and they're both younger guys. I think the Hornets are hitting a point with LaMelo Ball where it's going to be, where are we going with this? Like, they've done a lot to reset things there under the new ownership, under the new front office, under the new coaching staff. And I think if things are still going a little not great for them, I think you could see them move on from LaMelo Ball. And then the other one, I think we're going to hit by the time we get to the trade deadline. I think we're gonna see Zion, move because I think the Pelicans are gonna be I think they're gonna be bad, and I think they're gonna look and say, "All right, it's time. We've done everything we can do that can be reasonably expected." And the thing is, there's gotta be some team that's like, man, like, Zion? Like, let's go, and they'll, talk themselves into it over the last couple months of the year and going into the offseason as like, "Hey, we already made," especially if it's a team that doesn't have the ability to do a lot in the summertime a year from now. I think they could talk themselves into, "We already made our big move. We went and got Zion, and we'll see where it goes." Now, I hope it works out for him. I hope it works out for LaMelo, and those teams and fan bases deserve good things to happen to them, but I think that's where we're headed at this point.
It'd be good for the league if both those players really did pan out because, like,
Yeah.
you think about what it was like coming in. It's like I remember, following LaMelo through his whole route where he was, a highly touted freshman
Yeah.
in high school, and then goes on, he's playing overseas and doing all of that route before, players really getting paid. So I thought that was cool. And then Zion, like, everybody remembers what that was like.
Wow. And they're both so fun when
Yeah.
they are healthy and things are going well. They're arguably maybe the two most fun players in the league. If you get there, there's a world where I was like, if I was a really bad team, I was like, man, I got to juice things a little. I try to get both of them and just be like, look, we're fun at least. Like, for 25 games, we had LaMelo throwing lobs to Zion, and then they both got hurt, and we stink, and we're in the lottery. But and then obviously Utah. Like, if you're a veteran on Utah, like, good luck. Like, I don't know what the plan is with Market in there. That's a weird kind of mix right now, but it's like good luck on the Jazz. Like, they're definitely gonna be moving guys. They're gonna be a little bit of a way station, I think, for the next couple years, where it's guy revolving door of players in and out.
They're like a motel, like, nobody stays for long, like, you
That's
just
it.
hey, you're there for a short time, do what you gotta do, and then you're moving on with your
Yeah.
business, but, yeah, I think going back to your point with LaMelo and Zion, it's just, like, for such fun players, they've yet to play one true meaningful game of basketball on a bigger stage, like a playoffs or anything of that sort, and I think Zion for the Pelicans, whenever they've been good, he's been hurt and this and that, so, like, it does feel like that's coming to an end, but, Keith, another thing coming to an end, this episode. Really appreciate you. We kept you much longer than we intended to,
It's
but
all good.
sometimes that's just what you do when you're having fun. But please tell everybody where they could find you on social media and some of the awesome work that you're always putting out.
Yeah, you can find me at Keith Smith NBA on Twitter X. Same handle over on Blue Sky that's where you spend your time. Both places. Then you can find me at Spot Track. All my written work over at Spot Track. We're gonna kind of start getting back into some stuff. We've got some things coming out where it's gonna be looking at a handful of these guys. We talked about some of them, what their next contracts might look like. Well, what's it going to be? A handful of guys that are extension eligible and the like guys that are in the news. So like Kevin Durant, Trey Young, guys like that. And then I worked in a couple kind of surprise names too that I think will be fun for folks. Good off-season content for, I call it NB August because that's where we are. It's just like there's just not a lot going on. And then NBA front office show. Trevor Lane and I are still going strong. We're in the off season, so more like 3 times a week. It's kind of a Monday, Wednesday, Friday type schedule-ish in that range. But every Friday we're there for our live show, Front Office Friday. We have a lot of fun, but that's the fan show. It's their show to program and ask questions. And because we're in the off season, it started last week. We started getting more Marvel questions and what do we think about the Fantastic Four? And we'll have fun with that stuff too, because there's only so much basketball going on and talk right now. But before we know it, a couple weeks, Eurobasket starts. That'll be fun to watch. And ton of NBA guys in that. That's always a very good high level tournament each year. So that'll be a lot of fun. And I mean, we're like a month and a half and training camps will be opening up again. So it'll be back before we know it.
I got to ask you just real quick, what year will this be for you covering the league going into next season?
So since I started doing stuff like on a public front end, this will be year 12, I think.
Okay, this is perfect because we've got TS12 coming out October 3rd, Taylor Swift 12. We've got KS12 this year.
Yeah.
And we're going to release this part on Friday. So we are 7 weeks away from Taylor Swift's new album. So just wanted to say, Keith,
well done.
TS12, KS12. I think
that wasn't planned either, in case anybody's wondering.
I just had to ask the number. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I think 12. That's right. I
did just gonna say it's right.
Yeah, I did this a long time as like a second full-time job. For a while. Full-time, very easy to remember. 3 weeks to the day before Rudy Gobert had the whole incident and the league shut down in the pandemic year. That's 3 weeks to the day was when I walked out of Disney for the last time as a full-time employee and started doing just ball, because my timing is nothing if not impeccable.
Oh man, that is impeccable. I do like KS12, Facci. I think it's pretty good. I think that's what Keith needs to change his profile picture to or something.
Very catchy.
We'll see.
Hey, well, Keith, until next time, we appreciate you and truly mean it. Keep up the awesome work. You're a great follow for anyone who's not following. Hit that follow button on Keith.
I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. Joining us now on Setting the Pace, it is our fan of the week. It is Chandler Trout. Chandler, what is up, man? How are you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Doing good. I saw you just nod your head down. I see a St. Louis Cardinals hat on your head. Are you a big Cardinals fan?
Yes, I am. I am one of the few Cardinal fans, I believe, on the podcast. I don't know how many, but I know there are at least a few. I know there are a few, well, at least Facci is a Mets fan, so we got that. And then obviously Rooster is a Cubs fan, as we know, a couple Red fans, I think, too. So
why are we bringing up Rooster?
I don't even know. I know Rooster I follow, but, I don't know.
Yeah, we don't like the Cubs. We don't want to talk about the Cubs. We're talking about the Cardinals, man.
I mean, yeah, I saw the Cardinals. Unfortunately, did not win. So that was unfortunate.
Yeah, it's if they play the Rockies, they can't beat them. It's like equivalent to the Pacers' inability to beat the Charlotte Hornets for whatever reason. So, but Chandler, I do appreciate your support of this podcast. You're always in our comment section saying things like that. So I'm just curious, why we have you here. What do you like so much about Setting the Pace?
Well, I just love how it's really hard, I feel like, to find a group of people that actually love talking about the Pacers and that actually do it not only objectively but just really in depth, instead of oh well, they should just do this or do that, and it's the same basic whatever and just not that much detail, or they do it for 2 minutes and it's all right, I kind of want more than just 2 minutes, instead of actually going more in depth and okay, what should the Pacers do, lineups or contracts, all sorts of stuff like that. So, and just their thoughts of the season and what they can do to get better and improve.
Yeah, I mean that's what we're here for. I mean, we and Facci are diehard Pacer fans, and so we just want to talk about this team as much as we can, even if the conversation does get a little bit repetitive, especially during the off season. It is still just fun for us to have conversations and maybe take it at different angles as well than maybe we're taking it originally. But did you have any questions that you would like to ask me about the podcast, the Pacers, or anything?
Well, I guess one question I would ask is how did you come up with Setting the Pace? Did you already know Facci way beforehand, or how did that whole thing start? Because actually, I started following the end of the 2024 season when obviously we went on the Eastern Conference Finals run, and then that's when I started interacting with fans and all that stuff, and then I started getting way more into it during this past season that just happened. So
yeah, I feel like we've had a lot of people that are similar to you in terms of they kind of got on the Pacers bandwagon once they started winning again, which was great for us. We've seen our numbers just astronomically grow since then, and I think it's also helped that we've gone 5 days a week compared to once or twice a week that we used to do. So, back in the day, I had started a podcast before Setting the Pace. It was called like Let's Talk Pacers. I was doing it by myself like once a week. And I was like, I kind of want to co-host. I'm going to throw a thing out on Twitter. Facci responded. I DM'd him and I was like, hey, we'll try this out and see how it goes. Wasn't really sure. And then we did one for like a couple of months and I was like, I feel like we're just missing something. So I brought in Tyler Smith as well. We rebranded, named it Setting the Pace. Facci actually kind of came up with the name Setting the Pace originally. And so we're like, yeah, that works. We'll go with it. Felt a little cheesy at the time, but our first logo was like some cartoon version of Indiana Jones with Sabonis, Turner, and Victor Oladipo.
I think I might have seen that.
Yeah, I think I might have shared that as like a Throwback Thursday type thing, but like that was our first initial like Setting the Pace logo. I don't know why we went with that. I thought it was funny because it had Indiana Jones in it. And then as we've just grown and grown, obviously we wanted to go more than one time a week. So it was too much for Tyler to stay on full time as he was coaching girls basketball and youth pastor and stuff like that. So me and Facci just kind of carried the mantle. And during COVID, we went to 3 days a week. I think it kind of helped a little bit. And then I think it was like the 2022 season. Maybe we went to 5 days a week. I can't remember exactly, but it just kind of originated with me and Facci making a connection over Twitter. And it's funny to say that, but here we are near 7 years later, still doing a podcast.
Wow, yeah. Actually, I guess another question I would ask, unless it's more fair, I guess, for Facci to answer, but obviously he's not here. But do you know how he came up with the whole pep in the step?
That's a
how
great
that came
question
up?
to ask
Like,
Facci. I'll have to ask him.
Because I just thought it was like just random, like a pep in the step, and I'm just like, wow, I wonder where that came from.
Yeah, Facci's
Or when
always
he
good for
started.
one-liners, and I think what helps is if people do not know this, like it is more of a shtick between me and Facci. I like to like rib him a little bit because
Yep.
his reactions are just epic, and if he says something funny, I'll push it a little bit more just to keep it going and going. So the pep in the step, he had kind of brought it up a handful of times, and then I just kept asking about the pep in the step, and then it just kind of stuck. So I think that it's one of those things where he brought it to the table, and then I kept asking about it because I liked how excited he'd get. And then we just ran with it. So it's just playing off each other and trying to figure it out. But when we get it back on, it won't be on Friday's episode as we're listening to this Friday right now. It'll probably be on Monday's episode. I can ask Facci if I remember over the weekend not to forget that. But let me ask you a question.
Mhm.
Big Pacer fan, obviously. Great playoff run. Made it to the NBA Finals, Game 7. What is your favorite moment as a Pacer fan?
Favorite moment? Well, that's hard. I mean, like just from this playoff run, or just in general?
Just in general. I mean, you don't have to just use this playoff
It
run
would
as your
have
platform.
to be this playoff run. I don't know if you thought about it, because since obviously you're a Cardinals fan as well, but literally when all the stuff kept happening, I was like, are we gonna get a 2011 St. Louis Cardinals run, but for the Pacers? Like, I don't know. Like, I just had some like weird thing with like the Cardinals and the Pacers this year. Like, I don't know. It just it just felt so storybook. Like it just like things just didn't make sense. All the comebacks and it just kept happening, and I'm like, man, like, are we really gonna win a championship that we've never won? Because I mean, I got to see the Cardinals win the World Series, but the Pacers obviously is the first seeing them in the finals, and I'm just like, wow, like, am I able to witness another like championship? Because I haven't seen a championship since the Cardinals won. So
Yeah.
I was wondering if you had the same thought, or unless you didn't really think about it.
I always think about that 2011 St. Louis Cardinals World Series run and like how many epic comebacks they had, and everybody talks about David Freese being the hero, but I always feel like Berkman was the guy. Like that was the clutch
Berkman,
guy.
man, yep.
He was the quote
Could
unquote
argue
Aaron
the Finals
Neesmith.
MVP, or the World Series MVP. Could argue.
Yeah. I mean, he was kind of like the Aaron Neesmith of this year's group because Aaron Neesmith was like the leader, maybe even Nimhard at times. They were like the two guys that always got the Pacers in position for Tyrese to hit the shot. And David Freese always seemed to be the guy up to bat when they needed a big hit. So to win the game, not to maybe tie the game when you're down 9-7 with the bases loaded, right? So I'm just saying, it's just one of those things where it's a great comparison from you. And I think that every single one of our listeners here should just remember how incredible the 2011 Cardinals were. Like, better than any other Chicago Cubs team ever assembled. That run was just unbelievable. And so I could sit here and talk about that run for decades, but it does actually feel very similar in terms of just like the epic comebacks. Unfortunately, the Pacers were caught in the situation where Halliburton goes down. And if he doesn't get injured, we're probably saying, oh, it's identical.
Yeah. I mean, because I was thinking that, like when Tyrese, like when he was going off, I was like, oh yeah, we're winning this, like 100%. And then of course that happens. I'm just like, All right. Well, so much for that. And I don't know how many people you know, but I actually do live spaces during games. I actually do a live space pregame, during the game, halftime, and postgame. I actually have a friend of mine. I don't know if you know him, but I think he goes by like Robin Hood or something like that on Twitter. Anyway, so me and him, we call games together, and we would have people come in, and maybe they would join the space and commentate on the game or whatever. And we like witness a lot of history together, obviously. But actually, the first round I got to witness, or all three, or however many we had, I got to experience, or we all got to experience, obviously, the game winner, against the Bucks. But then the last 3 game winners, or the game tying shot, with the Knicks, actually my phone died each time. And so when that happened, I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna go in the living room. I'm just gonna go in the living room. My mom's just on the couch, my dad's on whatever, just looking at the TV or whatever. Like my dad can't really move because he has like a foot issue or whatever, but he's just on the couch laying there, whatever. And I'm just casually, just looking at like the TV or whatever, just, crossing my arms, just like looking or whatever crazy stuff's happening. And my dad's like, there's no chance or whatever. I'm like, listen, I don't know if you saw what happened to the Pacers at the end of the year and what happened in the last round. I'm just saying, just have some faith. just hang on. Just hang on. Anything could happen. Obviously, Aaron Nesmith gets like the putback, and then Tyrese hits the shot. And then the crazy thing with the Knicks series, game 1, when Towns missed like the one free throw, actually it was Towns and OG, I literally did the choke.
Oh no.
I really did it as I was like, they're choking this right now. And then when OG, he missed, and I looked at my dad and I said, do you think if Tyrese, if assuming OG, if he makes this next one or whatever, if he hits a game winner, do you think he might do the choke? Do you think he might do it? And then my dad was like, hey, he might do it. He might. And I was like, all right. And then Tyrese, he does like the whole thing, and then like the ball just goes up, goes down, and then I look at my dad. I'm not even looking at the TV, and I do the choke. I'm not even seeing what Tyrese is doing. Then all of a sudden I look at the replay, and all of a sudden Tyrese is doing it, and I was like, oh, I didn't even realize Tyrese did the choke the whole time. So I just thought it was funny that Tyrese actually did the Reggie Miller.
Yeah, I mean, and Reggie was on the call. I mean, it was epic. If it would have been a game winner versus a game tying shot, it might have been the greatest game winner in NBA history, like for playoff reasons, just because of how crazy that comeback was, being down 17 points and Nesmith dropping 20 points in that fourth quarter. So yeah, definitely an awesome playoff run that did not end in a championship, but could get as close as possible there in that game 7. So Chandler, I really do appreciate all of your support of this podcast and for coming on here and being our fan of the week. You talked about doing spaces during the games and things like that. So if people want to follow you on Twitter so they can hear your spaces throughout the regular season, where is your Twitter handle at?
Yeah, if anyone wants to follow me on Twitter, it is TroutyC4, TROUTYC4, for those who don't know how to spell that. But yeah, that's how you can find me on Twitter. All my other socials are there too, but yeah, that's pretty much what I use if I want to talk about Pacers or anything else, really.
Awesome stuff, guys. Well, that is Chandler Trout, and if you guys want to follow him, please do that at that Twitter handle. Chandler, we thank you so much for being our Setting the Pace fan of the week. And if you guys would like to be a fan of the week on this podcast, please email me at alexgoldenmba@gmail.com. I do have a handful of emails that I have not got a chance to schedule everybody yet, but we want to make sure that we keep bringing our fans on because we love hearing from you, and we want to just give you guys a chance to shine on the podcast. So Chandler, once again, thanks so much for coming on, and we'll have to have you on again sometime later in the future to talk about the Pacers.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me.
We keep scoring. We don't need to stop. New episodes, weekly drops. This your number 1 podcast. Sweeping every team. We gon' need a mop. Setting the pace with Alex and Facci. Alex and Facci. Alex and Allison. Setting the pace with Alex and Facci. Alex and Facci. Alex and Allison. Setting the pace with Alex and Facci. Alex and Facci. Alex and Allison. Setting the pace with Alex and Facci. Alex and Facci. Alex and Allison.